Don Augusto Mendoza shuffled along the crowded streets of Ciudad Esperanza, his weathered hands clutching a paper bag of fresh pan dulce and an old leather briefcase that had accompanied him through decades of life's trials and triumphs. The morning bustle of the city swirling around him like a relentless tide. As vendors called out their wares and office workers rushed to their destinations with eyes fixed on smartphone screens and minds already consumed by the day's demands. At 78, Don Augusto had become almost invisible to the younger generation that dominated these streets, his slight frame and deliberate pace an inconvenience to the hurried masses that pushed past him without a second glance or word of apology. Yet there remained in his amber eyes a quiet dignity, a flickering flame of pride that refused to be extinguished by the indifference of modern times. The briefcase he carried contained old photographs and letters from his days as the head trainer at Hacienda Los Cielos, once the most prestigious horse breeding estate in the region, now merely a fading memory like so many other traditions swept aside by progress and urban development. Don Augusto paused at the busy intersection of Avenida Libertad and Calle Esperanza, the irony of the street names not lost on him as he waited for the pedestrian signal, observing the impatient drivers, who inched forward, eager to continue their journey the moment the light changed, their engines rumbling with barely contained urgency. Across the intersection, seated at the bus stop, Valentina Ortiz glanced up from her journalism textbook, her attention caught by the elderly man's hesitation, something in his dignified solitude, speaking to her in a way that the countless faces she encountered each day rarely did, perhaps because he reminded her of her own grandfather, who had raised her with stories of a more courteous era when people acknowledged one another with respectful nods and kind words. She noticed how drivers seemed to look through Don Augusto, as if his slow pace and stooped shoulders rendered him unworthy of their consideration, a living obstacle rather than a person deserving of patience and respect. The walk signal illuminated, and Don Augusto stepped onto the crosswalk, his right hand gripping his walking cane a little tighter as he navigated the uneven pavement, the morning sun casting long shadows across the street as the city reluctantly awakened to another day of progress and ambition. Halfway across, a sudden weakness overcame him, his knees buckling beneath his weight as the world tilted sideways in a disorienting blur of color and sound, the briefcase tumbling from his grasp as he fought to remain upright, but gravity proved merciless, pulling him down toward the unforgiving asphalt. Valentina gasped as she witnessed Don Augusto collapse in slow motion, his body folding like delicate origami as the contents of his bag scattered across the street, pan dulce rolling between impatient vehicles while his precious briefcase remained, clutched against his chest in a final act of protection. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and began recording, her journalist instincts activating even as her heart raced with concern and disbelief at what happened next. Or rather, what didn't happen. The traffic continued to flow around Don Augusto as if he were nothing more than debris in a stream. Cars swerving slightly to avoid him but refusing to stop, their drivers' faces set in expressions of annoyance rather than concern, some even honking as if the fallen elderly man had inconvenienced them deliberately. "Dios mío, someone help him!" Valentina shouted, her voice drowned by the cacophony of engines and horns, her body frozen in horrified disbelief as she continued to record the scene, documenting the callous indifference of her fellow citizens while silently praying for someone, anyone, to show a shred of humanity. Manuel Rivera, a young businessman late for an important meeting, slowed his luxury sedan just enough to navigate around Don Augusto before accelerating away, his momentary guilt quickly buried beneath the urgency of his appointment. While Sofia, Delgado, a mother of three, averted her eyes from the scene, telling herself someone else would surely stop to help as she continued driving her children to school. Across the street, Valentina finally broke free from her paralysis and rushed toward the crosswalk, her phone still recording as she prepared to brave the ongoing traffic to reach the fallen man. But before she could step off the curb, an unexpected sight caused her to halt mid-stride, her breath catching in her throat as she struggled to comprehend the vision before her. From a narrow alleyway adjacent to Park Central emerged a magnificent white horse, its coat gleaming like polished marble under the morning sun, its powerful presence commanding immediate attention as it moved with deliberate grace toward the chaotic intersection. No rider guided its path, no reins or saddle adorned its muscular frame, yet it moved with unmistakable purpose, its dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural as it approached the crosswalk where Don Augusto lay vulnerable and exposed. Traffic screeched to a halt as the majestic animal stepped onto the crosswalk, drivers finally pressing their brakes not out of concern for the elderly man, but in astonishment at the unexpected appearance of such a creature in the heart of the city, their expressions transforming from irritation to wonder as the horse positioned itself between Don Augusto and the flow of vehicles, standing as an impromptu guardian. Valentina's hands trembled as she continued filming, tears streaming down her face at the powerful symbolism unfolding before her. This animal showing more compassion and dignity than any of the humans who had passed by, its silent presence a damning indictment of society's failures. Several drivers emerged from their vehicles, smartphones raised to capture the surreal scene, their previous hurry forgotten in the face of this extraordinary moment that demanded acknowledgement and reflection. Hector Dominguez, a paramedic who had been caught in the traffic jam, pushed through the growing crowd, his training overriding his astonishment as he knelt beside Don Augusto to assess his condition. "Senor, can you hear me?" Hector asked gently, checking vital signs while radioing for backup, his professional demeanor belying the emotional impact of witnessing the white horse standing sentinel just a few feet away, its posture alert yet calm as if it had performed this duty countless times before. Don Augusto's eyes fluttered open, his gaze immediately seeking not his human rescuer, but the magnificent animal that had come to his aid, a flicker of recognition crossing his weathered features as he whispered a single word that Hector couldn't quite catch. The crowd fell silent, the usual urban clamor replaced by a collective held breath as Don Augusto extended a trembling hand toward the horse, which lowered its noble head in acknowledgement before taking 3 steps backward, turning with fluid grace and retreating toward the alleyway from which it had appeared, disappearing as mysteriously as it had arrived, leaving behind a transformed intersection where strangers now reached out to help one another, their daily concerns momentarily forgotten in the wake of unexpected magic. The emergency room of Hospital San Rafael buzzed with whispered conversations as medical staff exchanged glances, their usual professional detachment temporarily suspended by the extraordinary circumstances surrounding their elderly patient, the story of the white horse spreading through the hospital corridors like wildfire. As Valentina's video accumulated thousands of views within hours of being uploaded to social media, Don Augusto sat upright in the hospital bed, his dignity restored by clean clothes and medical attention, though he refused to discuss the incident with the rotating staff who found increasingly creative reasons to enter his room, their curiosity about the mysterious white horse outweighing their professional boundaries. "Senor Mendoza, your tests show no serious injuries, just minor bruising and slight dehydration," Dr. Carmela Fuentes explained, her clipboard clutched against her chest as she studied the elderly man with undisguised curiosity, wondering if he might share some insight about the animal that had come to his rescue. "You're very fortunate." Don Augusto merely nodded, his weathered hands folded atop the thin hospital blanket, his thoughts clearly elsewhere as he gazed out the window toward the mountains that bordered Ciudad Esperanza, their distant peaks reminding him of another life, another time when his connection to horses had defined his very existence. Outside in the waiting area, Valentina paced nervously, her journalism professor's words echoing in her mind. "A true story finds you when you least expect it." And indeed, she had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that transcended the usual traffic accidents and petty crimes that dominated local news. Her video had been shared by celebrities and politicians alike, accompanied by hashtags demanding greater compassion and respect for the elderly, the image of the white horse, standing guard becoming an overnight symbol for the protection of the vulnerable. "Excuse me, are you Valentina Ortiz?" A tall man with intelligent eyes and a press badge approached her, his notebook already open as he extended his hand. "Mateo Jimenez from El Heraldo Nacional. Your video is causing quite a sensation. I'd like to interview you about what you witnessed." Valentina's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, her student journalist credentials suddenly insignificant compared to the attention of a reporter from the country's most prestigious newspaper. "I just recorded what happened," she replied modestly, though the truth was far more complex. She had captured a moment of magic in a cynical world, a visual poem about protection and dignity that resonated deeply with viewers across the social spectrum. "But yes, I'd be happy to talk with you." As Matteo and Valentina settled into the hospital cafeteria, neither noticed the elegant woman who entered the hospital's main doors, her designer sunglasses concealing eyes reddened from crying, her purposeful stride betraying a mixture of guilt and determination as she approached the reception desk. "I'm looking for Augusto Mendoza," she stated, her accent revealing years spent abroad, her manicured fingers nervously adjusting the gold pendant around her neck, a small horse crafted in exquisite detail. "I'm his daughter, Isabella." Across the city in the offices of El Heraldo Nacional, Editor-in-Chief Rafael Cortez scrolled through Valentina's video for the 5th time, his journalistic instincts telling him there was more to this story than a random act of animal behavior, something about the precise timing and deliberate actions of the horse, suggesting an intelligence that defied conventional explanation. "Find out everything you can about this Mendoza character," he instructed his assistant, leaning back in his leather chair as he contemplated the potential angles. "Tax records, property ownership, employment history, and dig into any connection to horses or ranching." Meanwhile, in the penthouse office of Torres Enterprises, overlooking the sprawling cityscape of Ciudad Esperanza, Alejandro Torres watched. The same viral video with narrowed eyes, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on his mahogany desk as recognition dawned. "It can't be," he muttered, pausing the video at the frame where the white horse stood most prominently, its distinctive markings triggering memories he had worked hard to suppress. After all these years, he reached for his phone, dialing, a number few people possessed. "Salvador, I need you to locate someone for me. Augusto Mendoza, former head trainer at Hacienda Los Cielos." Back at the hospital, Isabella Mendoza stood hesitantly at her father's door, the years of estrangement weighing heavily upon her as she observed him through the narrow window. Smaller than she remembered, frailer, yet still possessing that unmistakable dignity that had both inspired and frustrated her throughout her childhood. Their last conversation replayed in her mind, harsh words exchanged when she announced her intention to sell her portion of the family land to developers, effectively ending generations of horse-breeding tradition. "You choose concrete over heritage," he had said, his quiet disappointment more devastating than any shouted accusation could have been. "One day you will understand what cannot be bought or sold." Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door, the soft click causing Don Augusto to turn his head, his expression transforming from polite inquiry to profound shock as he recognized his only child. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice catching on her name as if it were a prayer he had recited in private for years. "Papa," she replied, the familiar term feeling foreign on her tongue after so much time speaking English in her adopted home of Miami, where she had built a successful interior design business catering to wealthy clients who valued her Latin aesthetic. "I saw the video. I came as soon as I could." Their reunion was interrupted by a nurse entering with discharge papers, her efficient manner softening as she witnessed their emotional reconnection. "Senor Mendoza can go home today, but he shouldn't be alone for at least 48 hours, she explained, handing the forms to Isabella, who accepted them with a nod, unspoken questions hanging between father and daughter about where home would be after so many years apart. As Don Augusto gathered his belongings, his fingers lingered on the old leather briefcase, caressing its worn surface with a tenderness reserved for treasured possessions. "They recovered this from the street," he explained to Isabella, who recognized it immediately as the constant companion from her childhood, the mysterious container that had always been off-limits to her curious hands. "Everything inside is still intact, gracias a Dios." Outside the hospital, a media circus had formed. Reporters and curious onlookers gathered in anticipation of Don Augusto's emergence, the story of the White Horse Guardian having captured the public imagination in a city starved for hope and meaning. Matteo positioned himself strategically near the exit, Valentina at his side, as they prepared to request a proper interview, neither aware of the complex history they were about to uncover, nor the powerful forces now interested in Don Augusto. Mendoza's connection to the mysterious White Horse. In the administrative offices of Ciudad Esperanza, Mayor Carmen Vega reviewed the viral video with her public relations team, recognizing both a challenge and an opportunity in the sudden international attention focused on the city's apparent callousness toward its elderly citizens. "We need to address this immediately," she declared, her political instincts sensing a chance to transform a potential public relations disaster into a triumph. "I want a ceremony at that intersection, something meaningful about respect and compassion, and find this Mendoza gentleman. Invite him as our guest of honor." Meanwhile, at the entrance to Parque Central, near the now famous intersection, veterinarian Luciana Rojas examined fresh hoofprints with professional curiosity, her trained eye recognizing details that casual observers had missed. "These are not from a working horse," she murmured to herself, measuring the distinctive pattern with her palm. "This animal is exceptionally well-bred, possibly Andalusian." She photographed the tracks before they could be disturbed, a theory forming in her mind that connected to rumors she had heard about the legendary horses of Hacienda Los Cielos, once known throughout Latin America for their almost supernatural intelligence and beauty, before the estate had fallen into decline following a mysterious incident decades earlier that locals still discussed in hushed tones. The old hacienda stood like a faded photograph against the backdrop of rolling hills, its once grand architecture now surrendering to nature's persistent reclamation, bougainvillea vines climbing the crumbling stucco walls as if attempting to hold the structure together through sheer determination and beauty. Isabella guided her rental car along the overgrown driveway, each bump and pothole triggering memories she had carefully packed away during her years in Miami, the sensation both unsettling and strangely comforting as Don Augusto sat silently beside her, his gnarled hands resting atop the leather briefcase in his lap. "I never thought I would bring you here again," he said finally, breaking the weighted silence that had accompanied them from the hospital. The doctors recommended familiar surroundings for recovery. Isabella's response carried a defensive edge, her guilt about abandoning the property and her father manifesting as barely concealed irritation. "Besides, my apartment in the city is too small for 2 people." As they approached the main house, evidence of neglect became increasingly apparent, shutters hanging askew, roof tiles missing like extracted teeth, the once magnificent gardens now wild and untamed, yet there remained an undeniable majesty to Hacienda Los Cielos that transcended its physical deterioration, a spiritual resonance that visitors had always commented upon, often struggling to articulate the sensation of peace and connection they experienced on the grounds. Don Augusto's expression softened as he gazed at his ancestral home, seeing beyond its current state to the vibrant estate it had once been, when the stables housed 40 purebred Andalusians and the Mendoza name was synonymous with equestrian excellence throughout Latin America. "The foundation is still strong," he observed with quiet satisfaction, his eyes traveling to the distant stables, once the pride of the hacienda, now standing empty and silent like abandoned cathedrals. "Some things endure despite neglect." Isabella flinched at the implied criticism, but chose not to respond, focusing instead on the practical challenges of making the hacienda habitable again, mentally cataloging necessary repairs as she helped. Her father from the car, surprised by how frail he felt beneath her supporting arm. Inside, sheets draped over furniture created ghostly silhouettes in the expansive main salon, dust motes dancing in the shafts of afternoon sunlight that penetrated the partially closed shutters, the air heavy with the scent of abandonment and distant memories. "I've been paying Doña Margarita from the village to check on things monthly," Don Augusto explained, moving with greater confidence now that he was on familiar territory, his hand trailing reverently across the sheet-covered piano where Isabella's mother had once played evening serenades as horses grazed in the paddocks visible through the French doors. "The electricity and water still work, though the hot water heater may need attention." As Isabella removed sheets and opened windows to air out the musty rooms, her phone buzzed insistently with notifications. Clients requiring attention, friends inquiring about her sudden departure from Miami. and increasingly, messages from journalists seeking information about her father and the viral video that had captured the world's imagination. One name appeared repeatedly: Mateo Jimenez from El Heraldo Nacional, his persistence suggesting he sensed a deeper story beneath the surface of the remarkable event. Across the city, in the sleek offices of Torres Enterprises, Alejandro Torres studied satellite images of Hacienda Los Cielos on his computer screen, his expression calculating as Salvador, his head of security, delivered a comprehensive report on the property's current ownership status. The eastern parcel belongs to Isabella Mendoza, following her mother's passing, but the main estate and western lands remain with Augusto Mendoza, Salvador explained, his tone professionally detached despite the questionable nature of his investigation. The entire property sits directly in the path of your proposed highway development, sir. Alejandro's fingers formed a steeple beneath his chin as he contemplated this information, memories of his own connection to Hacienda Los Cielos carefully compartmentalized behind his businessman's facade. Current market value, he inquired, though the question was merely performative. He had coveted those lands for reasons beyond their monetary worth for decades, waiting patiently for the opportunity to acquire them. Below actual value due to condition and the economic downturn, Salvador replied. However, with the recent publicity surrounding Señor Mendoza, interested buyers may emerge. Alejandro nodded thoughtfully, rotating his executive chair to gaze out at the city skyline, the empire he had built through determination and occasionally ruthless business practices spreading before him like a concrete testament to his ambition. Arrange a meeting with our friends at the Municipal Planning Office, he instructed, his decision already made, and find out everything you can about this white horse, where it came from, where it went, and why it appeared precisely when and where it did. At the veterinary clinic adjacent to Parque Central, Luciana Rojas compared the photographs of hoofprints she had collected with historical records of Andalusian breeding lines, her scientific curiosity evolving into fascination as patterns emerged that connected the mysterious white horse to the legendary bloodlines of Hacienda Los Cielos. Her research was interrupted by the arrival of Mayor Carmen Vega, whose political instincts had led her to seek expert consultation before the public ceremony planned for the following week. Dr. Rojas, I understand you've been investigating Hurricane celebrity, the mayor began, her practiced smile failing to disguise the calculation behind her friendly demeanor. The public is captivated by this story, and I want to honor both Señor Mendoza and acknowledge this unusual intervention. Luciana hesitated, her scientific training making her reluctant to share theories that might sound fanciful to the pragmatic politician, yet the evidence before her suggested something extraordinary. Mayor Vega, I believe this horse may be connected to the Mendoza breeding program that was famous decades ago, she explained carefully, showing the hoofprint comparisons. But there's something unusual about these tracks. The stride length, the depth of impression. They suggest an animal of exceptional size and strength, possibly from a bloodline thought to be extinct. The mayor's expression remained politely interested, though her thoughts were clearly focused on the political capital to be gained rather than zoological mysteries. Fascinating, Doctor. Would you consider speaking at our ceremony? A scientific perspective would add credibility to the event. Before Luciana could respond, her assistant entered with breaking news. Photographs had emerged on social media showing the white horse on the outskirts of the city, heading toward the hills where Hacienda Los Cielos was located. The images causing another viral sensation as the public's fascination with the animal intensified. Meanwhile, at the hacienda, Don Augusto had retreated to his former study, a room Isabella had avoided during her childhood due to its perpetually closed door and the sense of sacred privacy it represented in her father's life. Now, watching from the hallway as he unlocked the briefcase with a small key he wore around his neck, she was transported back to those moments of childhood curiosity and exclusion, the familiar ache of being kept from her father's innermost world resurfacing with surprising intensity. The briefcase opened to reveal not business documents as one might expect, but a collection of yellowed photographs, handwritten journals, and a small velvet pouch that Don Augusto handled with particular reverence, his weathered fingers trembling. Slightly as he extracted its contents, a braided horsehair bracelet bound with silver wire, showing signs of frequent handling over many years. Isabella's breath caught as recognition dawned, memories flooding back of her mother wearing an identical bracelet, claiming it protected their family through a connection to something greater than themselves, a belief Isabella had dismissed as superstition until her mother's final days when the bracelet had disappeared mysteriously from her wrist, an event the nurses couldn't explain and that had distressed her mother greatly. In the guest cottage of Hacienda Los Cielos, now serving as his temporary residence, Mateo Jimenez arranged his research materials methodically across the small wooden table, having convinced Isabella to grant him exclusive access to their story in exchange for assistance with the hacienda's immediate repairs, an arrangement that served his journalistic ambitions while appeasing his unexpected emotional response to the elegant woman whose complicated relationship with her father mirrored his own unresolved family history. Valentina had accompanied him, her student enthusiasm a counterpoint to his professional detachment, her genuine concern for Don Augusto's well-being, ensuring their welcome extended beyond mere journalistic opportunity. The public records show something strange, Mateo muttered, spreading municipal documents before them. 25 years ago, there was a fire in the main stable, reported as an accident, but the insurance claim was never filed, and shortly afterward, Hacienda Los Cielos stopped participating in international competitions, despite their horses winning consistently for decades. Valentina leaned closer, her journalistic instincts sharpening as she noted discrepancies in the official account. And look at this. At the same time, Torres Enterprises purchased large parcels of land surrounding the hacienda, essentially boxing in the property except for the mountain access. Her finger traced the property boundaries on an old survey map. It's almost as if someone was trying to isolate them. Their research was interrupted by a sound that sent chills along Valentina's spine. The distant but unmistakable whinny of a horse carried on the evening breeze from the direction of the abandoned stables, the sound so unexpected in the deserted hacienda that both journalists exchanged startled glances before grabbing their recording equipment and heading toward the source. Outside on the hacienda's expansive veranda, Don Augusto lifted his head at the familiar sound, a smile of profound recognition transforming his face as he rose from his chair with unexpected vigor, his earlier frailty seemingly forgotten as he moved toward the stone steps leading to the path that connected the main house to the stables. Phantasma, he whispered, the name carrying decades of emotion, his pace quickening despite Isabella's concerned protests as she followed him into the gathering dusk, the first stars appearing above the silhouetted mountains that had guarded Hacienda Los Cielos and its secrets for generations. Twilight embraced the hacienda in violet shadows as Don Augusto moved with unexpected purpose along the overgrown path toward the stables, decades of routine guiding his steps, despite the encroaching darkness and years of absence. His breathing labored but determined as Isabella followed anxiously behind, concern and curiosity warring across her features. "Papa, please slow down," she called, her city shoes ill-suited for the uneven terrain. Yet her father continued as if drawn by an irresistible force, his usual caution abandoned in response to the haunting whinny that had shattered the evening stillness. The stables loomed ahead, their grand Spanish colonial architecture still impressive despite years of neglect, massive wooden doors hanging partially open as if recently disturbed, though Isabella was certain they had been securely closed during her last inspection of the property before returning to Miami. Don Augusto paused at the entrance, his silhouette framed against the deepening blue of the sky, one hand resting on the weathered wood as he whispered something Isabella couldn't quite catch, a prayer perhaps, or a name repeated like an incantation. From the opposite direction, Mateo and Valentina approached with cameras ready, their journalist instincts heightened by the prospect of connecting the viral white horse to the abandoned stables of the once legendary Hacienda Los Cielos, though both slowed their pace out of respect for the clearly emotional moment unfolding before them. "Wait," Mateo murmured, placing a restraining hand on Valentina's arm as she raised her camera. "Let's observe first." Inside the main stable, moonlight filtered through broken roof tiles, creating dappled patterns across the earthen floor where Hoofprints were clearly visible in the dust, fresh impressions suggesting recent activity, despite the property's abandoned state. Don Augusto moved with the confidence of intimate familiarity, his fingers trailing along the empty stalls where champions had once stood proudly, their names still visible on tarnished brass plates: Relámpago, Estrella del Norte, Emperador, the foundation bloodlines of the Mendoza breeding program that had produced horses of exceptional intelligence and beauty. At the far end of the central corridor, the largest stall stood with its door slightly ajar, moonlight reflecting off something white within, causing Don Augusto to halt abruptly, his breath catching audibly in the hushed atmosphere. "Impossible," he whispered, though his tone suggested he had perhaps been waiting for this moment throughout the long years of solitude and regret. As Don Augusto approached the stall, Isabella felt a strange energy permeate the air, a tangible shift that raised goosebumps along her arms despite the warm evening, memories surfacing of childhood warnings never to enter the stables alone. Her mother's insistence that the Mendoza horses were more than mere animals. They were almas enlazadas, souls intertwined with the family through generations of selective breeding and mystical connection. She had dismissed these stories as cultural superstition, yet standing now in the moonlit stable with adult perspective, she recognized elements of truth in the legends she had rejected. The silence was broken by soft nickering from within the stall, a sound of gentle recognition that drew Don Augusto forward like a man entranced, his trembling hand reaching for the latch as Isabella found herself unable to move, transfixed by the unfolding scene that seemed to exist in the liminal space between reality and dream. From their vantage point near the entrance, Matteo and Valentina watched in astonished silence as Don Augusto swung open the stall door to reveal a magnificent white Andalusian horse, its coat luminous in the moonlight, powerful muscles rippling beneath pristine hide as it lowered its proud head in greeting, dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that transcended animal consciousness. Phantasma. Don Augusto's voice broke on the name, his hands reaching up to stroke the horse's muscular neck with the familiarity of long acquaintance, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered cheeks as the animal gently nuzzled his shoulder, their reunion charged with emotions too complex for simple categorization. Isabella stepped forward involuntarily, drawn by the extraordinary scene and the name that triggered distant memories. Phantasma, the legendary white colt born on the night of her grandmother's passing, the horse her father had called the Spirit Keeper, the animal that had disappeared on the night of the mysterious stable fire 25 years earlier, presumed lost like so many other treasures of Hacienda Los Cielos. "It can't be the same horse," she whispered, her rational mind rejecting the possibility, while her heart recognized the truth unfolding before her. After so many years, Matteo's camera captured the reunion in respectful silence, his journalistic detachment temporarily overcome by the raw authenticity of the moment, while Valentina found herself weeping quietly beside him, overwhelmed by the palpable sense of destiny fulfilled in the moonlit stable. Their presence was acknowledged with a graceful turning of Phantasma's head, intelligent eyes regarding them without fear or aggression, merely calm assessment before returning attention to Don Augusto, who had produced the horsehair bracelet from his pocket and was holding it against the animal's forehead, murmuring words in a dialect even Isabella didn't recognize, though their ritualistic nature was evident. The intimate scene was shattered by harsh flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, voices calling out as security personnel from Torres Enterprises swept into the stable, their intrusion transforming the magical reunion into a tableau of confrontation as Alejandro Torres himself appeared in the doorway, his tailored suit incongruous in the rustic setting, his expression shifting from triumph to shock as he registered the white horse's presence. "Augusto," he acknowledged coldly, decades of history compressed into the terse greeting, his gaze locked not on the elderly man, but on Phantasma, whose posture had changed subtly from relaxed to alert, ears forward and muscles tensed in recognition of potential threat. "I see you've been keeping secrets all these years." Don Augusto straightened to his full height, years of accumulated dignity evident in his bearing as he positioned himself protectively before the horse, his earlier frailty completely absent as he faced his longtime adversary. This land remains Mendoza property, Alejandro, he stated firmly, his voice carrying the authority of generations. Your men are trespassing. Torres gestured dismissively, his confidence suggesting knowledge of something the others didn't yet comprehend. For now, perhaps, but that will change soon enough, he replied, removing documents from his suit jacket with theatrical flourish. The municipal council votes tomorrow on eminent domain for my highway project, right through this charming relic of the past. He surveyed the dilapidated stable with exaggerated disdain. Progress waits for no man, Augusto, not even for the famous horse whisperer of Hacienda Los Cielos. Mateo stepped forward, his journalist's instincts recognizing the unfolding story's deeper implications. Mr. Torres, I'm Mateo Jimenez from El Heraldo Nacional, he introduced himself, camera still recording despite the confrontational atmosphere. Might I ask why the CEO of Torres Enterprises personally leads a security team onto private property after nightfall? It seems unusual for someone of your position. Alejandro's expression hardened, clearly unaccustomed to having his actions questioned, though his businessman's instinct for public relations prevented the angry retort visibly forming on his lips. Merely conducting preliminary survey work, with the property owner's permission, he replied smoothly, turning toward Isabella with calculated charm. Isn't that right, Ms. Mendoza? We discussed the potential sale of your portion of the hacienda before your hasty departure from Miami. Isabella flinched under her father's shocked gaze, the accusation in his eyes more painful than any verbal reproach could have been. The betrayal she had contemplated but not committed hanging between them like a physical presence. I never agreed to sell, she clarified, moving to stand beside Don Augusto in unmistakable solidarity. And I never will, not to you, not to anyone. Before Torres could respond, Fantasma moved forward with deliberate purpose, his powerful presence commanding attention as he positioned himself between the Mendoza family and the intruders, his stance neither aggressive nor fearful, but undeniably authoritative, as if establishing boundaries that transcended human legal documents. The security personnel retreated instinctively, their training insufficient preparation for confronting such a creature in the mystical atmosphere of the moonlit stable. Alejandro alone stood his ground, decades of ambition and resentment evident in his rigid posture as he faced the animal that featured prominently in his most private nightmares. This changes nothing, he stated flatly, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The council vote is merely a formality. By this time tomorrow, excavation equipment will be clearing this land regardless of your theatrical reunion with a horse that should have perished years ago. The accusation hung in the air, heavy with implications that caused Don Augusto to stiffen, his hand moving protectively to Fantasma's neck. Some things cannot be destroyed, Alejandro, he replied softly, his words carrying the weight of profound truth rather than empty defiance. Some bonds transcend your understanding. Torres laughed without humor, the sound harsh in the reverent atmosphere of the stable. Save your mystical nonsense for the tourists, old man, he sneered, though his eyes betrayed uneasiness as they remained fixed on Fantasma. I deal in reality, concrete, steel, and progress. Your fairy tales about special horses died with the old ways. He checked his expensive watch with exaggerated impatience. Enjoy your reunion while you can. The vote is scheduled for noon tomorrow. With that parting threat, he gestured for his security team to withdraw, their flashlight beams bouncing erratically across the weathered timbers as they retreated into the darkness, leaving behind a silence heavy with unresolved conflict and approaching decision. Valentina was the first to break the tension, her journalist's mind already formulating their response. We need to get this story out immediately, she urged, reviewing the footage on her camera with growing excitement. The mysterious white horse from the viral video, reunited with its original trainer at the endangered historic hacienda. It's perfect. Mateo nodded in agreement, his expression thoughtful as he considered angles and implications. More than that, we need to expose Torres's connection to the stable fire 25 years ago, he added, connecting threads of research with the night's revelations. His reaction to seeing Fantasma alive wasn't just surprise, it was fear. Don Augusto sighed heavily, the confrontation having drained his momentary strength as he leaned against Phantasma for support, the horse adjusting its position to better accommodate his weight. "The past returns to us all eventually," he murmured, cryptically, his fingers intertwining in the horse's silvery mane. "The truth cannot remain buried forever." As moonlight streamed through the broken roof, illuminating the tableau of horse and humans in ethereal light, Isabella felt a profound shift in her understanding of her heritage, the sophisticated Miami designer receding as the daughter of Hacienda Los Cielos emerged from dormancy, her connection to this land and its mystical guardians reasserting itself with undeniable power. Dawn broke over Hacienda Los Cielos in a spectacular symphony of amber and rose, the mountains cradling the rising sun as if presenting a gift to the valley below, where an unprecedented flurry of activity had transformed the once abandoned estate into a hive of purposeful energy. Word had spread throughout the night via Valentina's livestream and Mateo's urgent articles, drawing hundreds of local residents to the hacienda in a spontaneous show of support, their vehicles lining the rural access road as families arrived with food, tools, and determination to protect what many now recognized as an irreplaceable cultural treasure. Inside the main house, converted temporarily into campaign headquarters, Luciana Rojas spread her research materials across the antique dining table where the Mendoza family had once hosted diplomats and equestrian royalty, her scientific findings, providing crucial evidence as Mateo coordinated with environmental activists and historical preservation societies via video conference. "The genetic markers are undeniable," Luciana explained, pointing to DNA comparisons projected onto a makeshift screen. Phantasma carries genetic traits considered extinct for decades, adaptations unique to the Andalusian horses, bred specifically by the Mendoza family since colonial times, including enhanced intelligence markers similar to those found in certain dolphin species. Nearby, Mayor Carmen Vega shifted uncomfortably in her tailored suit, her political calculations visibly recalibrating as she assessed the growing crowd outside and the compelling narrative unfolding within, her scheduled appearance at the fire. Council vote now fraught with previously unforeseen complications. "The historical significance is certainly noteworthy," she acknowledged cautiously, her politician's instinct for survival overriding any private commitments to Torres Enterprises. "And the public sentiment is impossible to ignore." In the stable, now bustling with volunteer carpenters making emergency repairs to weather-damaged sections, Don Augusto sat on a weathered wooden bench beside Phantasma's stall, the leather briefcase open on his lap as he shared its contents with Isabella for the first time. Decades of secrecy, giving way to the urgent need for truth before the crucial council vote. "Your mother never told you the full story of our family's connection to these horses," he began, removing a yellowed parchment covered with intricate calligraphy and faded sketches of distinctively marked Andalusians. "When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in this valley, they brought Andalusian horses considered sacred, animals believed to carry the spirits of fallen warriors, blessed by priests before the journey across the ocean." Isabella examined the document with newfound respect, her designer's eye appreciating the artistic renderings, while her awakening spiritual sense responded to the power embedded in the ancient text. "Our ancestor, Fernando Mendoza, was entrusted with these horses after saving the life of a Spanish captain," Don Augusto continued, his voice strengthening as he recounted the family legend. "He was given a sacred duty to maintain the bloodline that carried not just superior genetics, but a spiritual connection to the land and its protectors. He extracted a silver medallion from the briefcase, its surface etched with the image of a rearing horse surrounded by arcane symbols. This was his pledge, passed through generations of Mendozas, a responsibility I accepted when your grandfather passed, and one I failed to transfer to you." From the stall, Phantasma nickered softly as if acknowledging his role in the unfolding narrative, his intelligent eyes following the conversation with uncanny comprehension. "The night of the fire," Don Augusto continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he approached painful memories. "Alejandro Torres came with an offer To buy the hacienda, an offer I refused. His father had tried before him, always coveting our land, always denied by my father as I denied his son. He paused, weathered hands trembling slightly as he extracted a charred piece of wood from the briefcase. He threatened to destroy everything, if I wouldn't sell. I never imagined he would actually set fire to the stables while our horses were inside. Isabella gasped, pieces falling into place as she recalled Torres's expression upon seeing Phantasma alive. He thought all the horses had perished, she whispered, the horror of that night becoming vivid despite her absence. He believed he had destroyed the bloodline completely. Don Augusto nodded solemnly, his gaze distant with remembered trauma. Many did perish, champions, beloved companions, irreplaceable bloodlines reduced to ash, he confirmed, grief still evident decades later. But Phantasma. He broke free somehow, disappeared into the mountains. I searched for months but eventually accepted that he too was gone. His expression softened as he glanced toward the stall where the magnificent white horse stood watching them. Yet here he is, unchanged after 25 years, appearing exactly when needed. First to protect me at the crosswalk, now to save his ancestral home. Outside, the crowd had swelled to include national media outlets drawn by the compelling combination of viral video, fame, environmental activism, and potential corporate malfeasance, their cameras capturing the spontaneous restoration efforts as volunteers cleared overgrown gardens and repaired fencing, transforming years of neglect in hours of dedicated community action. From the Municipal Council building downtown, live broadcasts showed growing crowds of protesters inspired by the hacienda's story, many carrying signs featuring Phantasma's image alongside slogans about preservation and respect. Alejandro Torres watched these developments from his penthouse office with mounting fury. Decades of carefully orchestrated plans unraveling in the face of public sentiment and unexpected revelations, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from nervous council, members and concerned investors, sensing a shift in the political winds. Find something on Mendoza. Anything, he barked at Salvador, pacing the expansive office like a caged predator. Tax irregularities, property violations, anything we can use to discredit him before the vote. Salvador shifted uncomfortably, his tablet displaying the rapidly spreading news coverage. Sir, there may be a more immediate problem, he replied cautiously. The journalists have uncovered insurance investigation records from the stable fire, preliminary findings that questioned the accidental designation before the case was mysteriously closed. Torres froze mid-stride, the implications striking like physical blows as his carefully constructed empire of respectability threatened to collapse under the weight of long-buried crimes. How did they access sealed records, he demanded, though the question was rhetorical, desperation making him verbose rather than strategic. It doesn't matter, he decided abruptly, reaching for his suit jacket. We proceed as planned. I still have enough votes secured on the council. As noon approached, the municipal council chambers filled beyond capacity, citizens spilling into hallways and gathering around public screens erected in the plaza outside. The routine zoning vote transformed into a referendum on the community's values and relationship with its past. Inside Hacienda Los Cielos, final preparations were underway for Don Augusto's appearance at the hearing. His frail body rejuvenated by purpose and connection as Isabella helped him into his finest Guayabera shirt, crisp and white against his weathered skin. You don't have to do this, Papa, she said softly, concern evident as she noted his occasional unsteadiness. Mateo and the lawyers can present our case. Don Augusto shook his head with gentle determination, his dignity fully restored by the events of recent days. Some battles must be faced in person, he replied, his gaze drifting toward the window where Phantasma could be seen grazing in the morning sunlight, his white coat gleaming like polished marble. Besides, I will not be alone. Outside, final. Preparations for departure were interrupted by the unexpected arrival of a convoy of vehicles bearing the insignia of the National Cultural Heritage Department, distinguished officials in formal attire emerging with clipboards and cameras as A senior representative approached Mateo with brisk efficiency. "We've reviewed the emergency application submitted yesterday," the official announced, presenting documents bearing government seals. Based on the historical evidence and genetic research provided by Dr. Rojas, Hacienda Los Cielos has been granted preliminary protected status as a living cultural heritage site, effective immediately. The news rippled through the assembled crowd, cheers erupting spontaneously as volunteers embraced and journalists rushed to capture the moment. The tide of events shifting decisively against Torres Enterprises' development plans even before the council vote could occur. Amid the celebration, Don Augusto emerged from the hacienda, Isabella supporting him on one side while Valentina documented his dignified progress toward the waiting vehicle, his expression serene despite the momentous confrontation ahead. There, procession halted at a collective gasp from the crowd, attention shifting unanimously toward the stables, where Fantasma had emerged without halter or lead, his powerful presence commanding attention as he approached Don Augusto with deliberate steps, stopping before him with a regal lowering of his head. Without hesitation, Don Augusto placed his hand on the horse's forehead, murmuring words too soft for others to hear, though their ceremonial nature was evident in his posture and tone. Then, to the astonishment of all present, he grasped Fantasma's flowing mane and with unexpected agility pulled himself onto the horse's back, sitting tall despite his years, the embodiment of the heritage he represented. "To the council," he announced simply, his voice carrying unexpected strength as Fantasma turned toward the road, the crowd parting instinctively to create a path for horse and rider. In the council, Chamber's proceedings had devolved into procedural chaos as Torres attorneys attempted to expedite the vote, while opposition lawyers sought delays based on newly presented evidence, the council members visibly uncomfortable under the scrutiny of national media and the passionate audience filling every available space. Mayor Vega struggled to maintain order, her political survival instincts working overtime as she recognized the shifting dynamics that made her previous alignment with Torres increasingly untenable. The decisive moment arrived with a commotion at the chamber doors, gasps and exclamations spreading from the entrance throughout the room as Don Augusto Mendoza entered riding Fantasma, the magnificent white horse moving with impossible grace. Through the government building, his hooves surprisingly silent on the marble floors, as if out of respect for the proceedings he interrupted. The chamber fell into stunned silence, the tableau of elderly horseman and powerful animal framed in the ornate doorway, creating an image that photographers instinctively captured. Tradition confronting progress, dignity challenging expedience, the living embodiment of cultural heritage asserting its rightful place in deciding the community's future. Alejandro Torres rose from his seat in barely controlled fury, decades of ambition and entitlement crystallized in his rigid posture as he faced the man and animal he had attempted to destroy. "This is absurd," he protested, gesturing angrily toward Don Augusto and Fantasma. "You cannot allow animals in a government proceeding. This theatrical stunt is beneath the dignity of this council." Mayor Vega found herself at the pivotal moment of her political career, all eyes upon her as she weighed her response, the calculated path suddenly less clear than the moral one. "The dignity of this council," she replied with newfound conviction, "lies in its willingness to hear all voices affected by its decisions, including those who cannot speak but are no less impacted by our choices." She gestured toward Don Augusto. "Señor Mendoza, you have the floor." What followed was less a formal testimony than a restoration of balance, Don Augusto speaking not just of legal ownership and historical significance, but of responsibility to preserve connections between past and future, his words carrying the weight of generations as Fantasma stood in quiet strength beside him, their bond visible to all present. When Torres attempted to interrupt with procedural objections, Fantasma turned his intelligent gaze upon the businessman, the horse's calm assessment somehow more devastating than any human confrontation could have been, causing Torres to falter mid-sentence and retreat to his seat. The vote, when finally called, was unanimous against the development proposal, council members finding unexpected courage in the presence of something greater than political expediency, their decision greeted by thunderous applause from those assembled and celebrations erupting in the plaza outside, where thousands watched on public screens. In the aftermath, as journalists swarmed for interviews and officials presented Don Augusto with formal protection documents, Isabella found herself standing slightly apart, watching her father's transformation from forgotten elder to community patriarch, her own place in this legacy suddenly clear despite years of denial and distance. Matteo approached quietly, his journalist's detachment softened by genuine admiration for what he had witnessed. "Your father is extraordinary," he observed, his gaze following Don Augusto as attendants helped him dismount from Phantasma's back. "As is that horse, though I still can't explain how an animal could survive unchanged for 25 years, appearing exactly when needed." Isabella smiled, her hand unconsciously touching the horsehair bracelet her father had given her that morning, its silver wire warm against her skin. "Perhaps some mysteries aren't meant to be explained," she replied, her designer's pragmatism giving way to inherited wisdom. "Perhaps they're meant to be honored and protected." As sunset painted the council building in hues of gold and amber, Don Augusto and Phantasma emerged to thunderous applause, the elderly man's dignity matched by the horse's serene power as they moved through the crowd toward home, not as master and animal, but as partners in guardianship, their connection transcending conventional understanding in a world increasingly hungry for meaning beyond material progress. Behind them, Isabella walked alongside Matteo, Valentina, and Luciana, their diverse talents united by the unexpected journey that had transformed them from observers to participants in a story greater than themselves, their paths forever altered by the white horse who had stopped traffic to protect a fallen elder, and in doing so, had awakened a community to its forgotten values of compassion, respect, and connection to both past and future. And in the fading light, as Hacienda Los Cielos welcomed its defenders home, Phantasma's white coat seemed to glow with inner light, a beacon of possibility in a world too often surrendered to indifference and haste, his presence a reminder that true guardians appear when most needed, in forms both unexpected and profound. 6 months transformed Hacienda Los Cielos from neglected relic to vibrant cultural center, its restored buildings now housing the Andalusian Heritage Foundation alongside a sanctuary for endangered horse breeds. Visitors from across the continent drawn by the legendary White Guardian, whose appearance had captivated millions worldwide. The intersection where Don Augusto had fallen now featured a spectacular mosaic crosswalk depicting a white horse in mid-stride. The installation inaugurated with a ceremony attended by dignitaries and ordinary citizens alike, all touched by the story that had awakened their community to forgotten values of respect and protection. Isabella had postponed her return to Miami indefinitely, her design skills now dedicated to harmonizing restoration with preservation throughout the hacienda. Her relationship with Matteo evolving from professional collaboration to something deeper as they worked side by side, documenting the estate's ongoing transformation. In the main house, Don Augusto's study door remained permanently open, the once private sanctuary now a museum where visitors could view historical documents and artifacts chronicling the Mendoza family's centuries-long stewardship of the sacred Andalusian bloodlines, though the horsehair bracelets remained private heirlooms worn only by family members and those who had earned guardian status through dedication to the hacienda's mission. Alejandro Torres had departed Ciudad Esperanza following investigations into the historical stable fire. His corporate empire diminished but not destroyed as he sought new opportunities far from the community that had rejected his vision of progress. His defeat serving as cautionary example to developers throughout the region who now approached historical properties with newfound respect and sensitivity. Each morning at dawn, residents and visitors gathered at respectful distance to witness Don Augusto and Phantasma's daily ride along the mountain trails bordering the hacienda, the elderly horseman sitting tall despite his years, his dignity matched by the white stallion's power and grace as they patrolled boundaries both physical and spiritual with unwavering dedication. Scholars and scientists continued to debate Phantasma's extraordinary nature, his apparent agelessness, his intuitive appearances precisely when needed, his intelligence beyond conventional animal cognition, yet the horse accepted their attention with equine serenity, neither confirming nor denying the whispered theories about his true nature as something beyond ordinary classification. On the anniversary of that fateful day at the crosswalk, as Ciudad Esperanza celebrated with a festival honoring its renewed commitment to compassion and heritage, Valentina completed her documentary film chronicling the White Horse's intervention and subsequent transformation of the community, the premiere attended by thousands in the city's main plaza, their collective emotion palpable as they relived the journey from indifference to connection. And in the quiet moments between public celebrations and private reflections, when moonlight silvered the restored hacienda and stars wheeled overhead in eternal patterns, Don Augusto would sometimes sit alone with Fantasma in the central courtyard. No words necessary between guardians who understood that some bonds transcend explanation, some duties span generations, and some spirits manifest exactly as needed to remind humanity of its better nature, appearing as protectors when the vulnerable require defense against the relentless tide of progress untethered from compassion and wisdom. For in the end, the true legacy of Hacienda Los Cielos was not its buildings or bloodlines, but the enduring reminder that dignity deserves defense, tradition carries wisdom worth preserving, and sometimes the most powerful guardians arrive in forms we recognize